Good morning. Thank you for joining me in this morning mindfulness practice. Let's get settled in, turn off other distractions, and just give yourself this time to get grounded, to get still. Take a deep breath in and let that go. Three deep, long breaths will signal to your central nervous system that you are safe. You can be calm amid the noise and the haste. You can set an intention that this day will run smoothly. And if it doesn't, your heart is calm, your central nervous system is not overwhelmed, and you can take whatever comes your way. I want to read from The Hidden Power by Thomas Troward, and he talks about completeness, a point on which all students of mental science often fail to lay sufficient stress is the completeness of mankind. Man, not a completeness to be attained hereafter, but here and now. We've been so accustomed to have the imperfections of man drummed into us in books, sermons, and hymns, and above all, in a mistaken interpretation of the Bible, that at first the idea of his completeness altogether staggers us. Yet until we see this, we must remain shut out from the highest and best that mental science has to offer, from a thorough understanding of its philosophy and from its greatest practical accomplishments. To do any work successfully, you must believe yourself to be a whole person in respect of it. The completed work is the outward image of a corresponding completeness in yourself. And if this is true in respect of one work, it is true of all. We cannot successfully attempt any work until, for some reason or another, we believe ourselves able to accomplish it. In other words, until we believe that none of the conditions for its completion is wanting in us, and that we are therefore complete in respect of it. Our recognition of our completeness is thus the measure of what we are able to do, and hence the great importance of knowing the fact of our own completeness. But it may be asked, do we not see imperfection all around? Is there not sorrow, sickness, and trouble? Yes. But why? Just for the very reason that we do not realize our completeness. If we realized that in its fullness, these things would not be, and in the degree in which we come to realize it, we shall find them steadily diminish. Now, if we really grasp the two fundamental truths that spirit is life, pure and simple, and that external things are the result of internal forces, then it ought not to be difficult to see why we should be complete. For to suppose otherwise is to suppose the reactive power of the universe to be either unable or unwilling to produce the complete expression of its own intention in the creation of man. That it should be unable to do so would be to depose it from its place as the creative principle, and that it should be unwilling to fulfill its own intention is a contradiction in terms. So that on either supposition we come to a reductio ad absurdum. In forming man, the creative principle therefore must have produced a perfect work. And our conception of ourselves as imperfect can only be the result of our own ignorance of what we really are. And our advance, therefore, does not consist in having something new added to us, but in learning to bring into action powers which already exist in us, but which we have never tried to use, and therefore have not developed, simply because we have always taken it for granted that we are by nature defective in some of the most important faculties necessary to fit us to our environment. Troward says, if we wish to attain to these great powers, the question is, where are we to seek them? And the answer is, in ourselves. That is a great secret. We are not to go outside ourselves to look for power. As soon as we do so, we find not power, but weakness. To seek strength from any outside source is to make affirmation of our weakness, and all know what the natural result of such an affirmation must be. When we affirm we are weak, we become weaker. When we affirm we are strong, healthy, happy, we say those words and our subconscious starts to believe that. We are complete in ourselves. And the reason why we fail to realize this is that we do not understand how far the self of ourselves extends. We know that the whole of anything consists of all its parts and not only of some of them, yet this is just what we do not seem to know about ourselves. We say rightly that every person is a concentration of the universal spirit into individual consciousness. But if so, then each individual consciousness must find the universal spirit to be the infinite expression of itself. It is this part of the self that we so often leave out of our estimate of what we are, and consequently we look upon ourselves as crawling pygmies when we might think of ourselves as archangels. We try to work with the mere shadows of ourselves instead of with the glorious substance, and then we wonder at our failures. If we only understood that our better half is the whole infinite of spirit, that which creates and sustains the universe, then we should know how complete our completeness is. As we approach this completeness, as we approach this conception, this completeness becomes a reality to us. And we find that we need not go outside ourselves for anything. We have only to draw upon that part of ourselves which is infinite to carry out any intention we may form in our individual consciousness, for there is no barrier between the two parts. Otherwise, the two parts would not be whole. Each belongs perfectly to the other, and the two are one. Your conscious, your subconscious, your spiritual side and your physical side. There is no antagonism between them, for the infinite life can have no interest against its individualization of itself. If there is any feeling of tension, it proceeds from our not fully realizing this conception of our own wholeness. We are placing a barrier somewhere. when in truth there is none. And the tension will continue until we find out where and how we are setting up this internal barrier and remove it. This feeling of tension is the feeling that we are not using our whole being. We are trying to make half do the work of the whole, but we cannot rid ourselves of our wholeness, and therefore the whole protests against our attempts to set one half against the other. But when we realize that our concentration out of the infinite also implies our expansion into it, we shall see that our whole self includes both the concentration and the expansion. And seeing this first intellectually, we shall gradually learn to use our knowledge practically and bring our whole man to bear upon whatever we take in hand. We shall find that there is in us a constant action and reaction between the infinite and the individual, like the circulation of the blood from the heart to the extremities and back again. A constant pulsation of vital energy, quite natural and free from all strain and exertion. This is the great secret of the livingness of life, and it is called by many names and set forth under many symbols in various religions and philosophies, each of which has its value in proportion as it brings us nearer the realization of this perfect wholeness. But the thing itself is life, and therefore can only be suggested but not described by any words or symbols. It is a matter of personal experience which no one can convey to another. All we can do is to point out the direction in which this experience is to be sought, and to tell others the intellectual arguments which have helped us to find it. But the experience itself is the operation of definite, vital functions of the inner being, and no one but ourselves can do our living for us. No one but ourselves can do our living for us. But so far as it is possible to express these things in words, what must be the result of realizing that the self in us includes the infinite as well as the individual? All the resources of the infinite must be at our disposal. We may draw on them at will, and there is no limit save that imposed by the law of kindness, a self-imposed limitation, which, because of being self-imposed, is not bondage, but only another expression of our liberty. Thus we are free, and all limitations are removed. We are also no longer ignorant, for since the self in us includes the infinite, we can draw thence all needed knowledge. And though we may not always be able to formulate this knowledge in the mentality, we shall feel its guidance. And eventually the mentality will learn to put this also in form of words. And thus, by combining thought and experience, theory and practice, we shall by degrees come more and more into the knowledge of the law of our being. And we find that there is no place in it for fear, because it is the law of perfect liberty. And knowing that our whole self, knowing what our whole self really is, we shall walk erect as free men and women, radiating light and life all around, so that our very presence will carry a vivifying influence with it, because we realize ourselves to be an affirmative whole and not a mere negative disintegration of parts. We know that our whole self includes that greater man which is back of and causes the phenomenal man. And this greater man is the true human principle in us. It is therefore universal in its sympathies, but at the same time, not less individually ourself. And thus the true man in us, being at once both universal and individual, can be trusted as a sure guide. It is that thinker which is behind the conscious mentality, and which, if we accept it as our center and realize that it is not a separate entity, but ourselves, will be found equal to every occasion and will lead us out of a condition of servitude into the glorious liberty of the sons of God. You have an inner guidance system. You can tap in to the energy that creates worlds. You are co-creating your life with infinite. In the principle of guidance, Troward says, if I were asked which of all the spiritual principles ranked first, I should feel inclined to say the principle of guidance, not in the sense of being more essential than the others, for every portion is equally essential to the completeness of a perfect whole, but in the sense of being first in order of sequence and giving value to all our other powers by placing them in their due relation to one another. Giving value to our other powers, I say, because this also is one of our powers. It is that which, judged from the standpoint of personal self-consciousness, is above us, but which, realized from the point of view of the unity of all spirit, is part and parcel of ourselves, because it is that infinite mind which is of necessity identified with all its manifestations. What I take that to mean is you are a divine representation of infinite spirit, but so is your neighbor, your best friend, your enemy. Each person is a representation of infinite. How do you want to operate in this physical realm? You are here as a spark of the infinite, living in a physical container, a body, and your body is simply the instrument of mind. So you decide what you want to experience in this life. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? How are you developing yourself and helping others around you to be developed, to come back to that infinite, that guidance system that you can tap into by becoming still, quiet, asking. Troward says the action of the spiritual principles in us follows the orders which we impose upon them by our thought. Therefore, the order of realization will reproduce the order of desire. And if we neglect this first principle of right order and guidance, we shall find ourselves beginning to put forth other great powers which are at present latent within us, without knowing how to find suitable employment them, which would be a very perilous condition. For without having before us objects worthy of the powers to which we awake, we should waste them on petty purposes dictated only by the narrow range of our unilluminated intellect. Therefore, the ancient wisdom says, with all thy getting, get understanding. The awakening of consciousness of our mysterious interior powers will sooner or later take place and will result in our using them, whether we understand the law of their development or not, just as we already use our physical faculties, whether we understand their laws or not. The interior powers are natural powers as much as the exterior ones. We can direct their use by a knowledge of their laws, and it is therefore of the highest importance to have some sound principle of guidance in the use of these higher faculties as they begin to manifest themselves. If we therefore would safely and profitably enter upon the possession of the great inheritance of power that is opening out before us, we must, before all things, seek to realize in ourselves that superior intelligence, which will become an unfailing principle of guidance if we will only recognize it as such. Everything depends upon our recognition that inner guidance, that source energy, God within you. Thoughts are things, and therefore, as we will our thoughts to be, so we will the thing to be. If then we will to use the infinite spirit as a spirit of guidance, we shall find that the fact is as we have willed it. And in doing this, we are still making use of our own supreme principle. And this is the true understanding which, by placing all other powers in their correct order, creates one grand unity of power directed to clearly defined and worthy aims in place of the dispersion of our powers. So you want to focus your thinking power in the direction of what it is that you truly desire. You can have whatever physical things, material things you want. You can have peace. You can bring purpose into your life. Decide how you want to live and get into that state of being. Don't simply replay the old negative messages or the limiting beliefs that were handed down through the generations, but tap into that internal guidance system, source energy that is always for expansion, so we understand that the past has prepared us. But where are we going in the future? Big, beautiful goals for all, for peace, for love, for purpose, for prosperity, whatever it is that you desire, your heart must feel that. The ideal is the true real, but it must be brought into manifestation before it can be shown to be so. And it is in this that the practical nature of our mental studies consists. It is the practical mystic who is the man of power, the man who, realizing the mystical powers within, fits his outward action to this knowledge, and so shows his faith by his works. And assuredly, the first step is to make use of that power of infallible guidance, which he can call to his aid simply by desiring to be led by it. Allow the Spirit to work through you. Decide what it is that you want. How do you want to feel? Where you direct your energies becomes the results, the outcomes of your experience. You cannot hold negative thoughts and feelings and create the beautiful life that you dream of. It's not a dream, it is directing your energy in the direction of what you desire, directing your thoughts, your feelings, your actions for what you want to be. We are always becoming. I don't think there's ever an end, but our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions continually reproduce in the physical realm what we are thinking, what we are doing. We hold an image in our mind, we form an image, and then we co-create that form, we bring it into reality, we experience it through our senses. Realize that whatever you're building in your mind, good or bad, is becoming. Use that momentum of the positive to direct your energy in the positive direction of what you want to be, do, and have. Whatever you believe is what you experience. I gave you a lot to think about today. It's pretty deep. Create a wonderful day. Enjoy your weekend. See how directing your energies changes your outer environment. Thank you for joining me in this morning mindfulness practice. Spend some time in quiet anticipation of your heart's desire, and I'll see you back here Monday morning at 7. Thank you.